wanted to situate our readers. I wanted to give us context of your film education before workforce, and specifically how did the nourishment occur between you and Michel Franco as producers, the importance behind uneasy portraits of your native country. I want to get an idea of how purposeful or how important that is in your early career as a producer.
First of all, I didn't study film, so my first approach to the world of cinema was through Michel when I started working with him as a almost production assistant. I was 22, 23 at the time. So of course, I mean, he was a big influence, and even more, I mean, I wouldn't say he was, like, his influence was not maybe in the subject of his films, but the way he approaches filmmaking and the understanding of the language, without a doubt, he was a crucial. I mean, it was all I had when I was 23, and I was learning a lot from him. And he also pushed me a lot to see other directors, other films. I was not into film when I got to him, so he taught me a lot about his vision, but also the vision of other directors. And yeah, the subject of the films that we might be making about social issues or context in Mexico City, I mean in Mexico in general, I mean it's happening, of course, but it's also happening with other directors. We're not the only ones doing it, so I think it's kind of a wave of Mexican cinema that's talking about these issues. The only explanation would be that, I mean, we're trying to figure out the reality around us and portray it in our works. So if it's consistent with social issues, then that's what's going around us. There's I think there's a lot of directors that are doing these portraits of modern Mexico with social issues, violence. Yeah, so I would say we're just two. I mean, Michel and I, of course, have a similar sensitivity. If it wasn't that way, we wouldn't be working together for so many years. But we're not the only ones in that line. So
yeah, and pushing the envelope and really getting to the core of really significant and problems and
yeah, it's someone asked me if my films and Michel's and maybe Amat Escalante were they too brutal, and my answer was if they're too brutal, then Mexico is too brutal, because we're only trying to portray what we see around us. We're not just making things up, it's our job as creators, not only filmmakers, but creators in general, through art, to reflect what's around us and try to do it in an objective way. I think we're serious filmmakers. We take things seriously. We don't take many liberties in the sense of making things up and just writing whatever comes to our mind.
I just want to get a sense of, like, I love Workforce, and there's a couple of different titles, working titles for it, but I just wanted to get a sense of, in between films, like the sophomore film is such a crucial film, and so I just wanted to get a sense of, like, what did you learn, what did you extract?
Workforce means a lot, of course, in my career. It was my first film. It was a moment where I didn't want to just produce anymore. I wanted to take things into my hands, like put the direction. I was working in many projects as in production, but I had this feeling that I wanted to be the guide of a project, creatively, and Workforce was my first step into that territory, and it was a unique experience. I think it's never going to repeat itself. I mean, it was, it's the first one. The first of everything is special, and I learned a lot from it. Then Heroic, it's a more ambitious project. It's bigger in every sense. I mean, narratively.
The shot count is at least double of Workforce.
Yeah. It's an ambitious project. It's bigger, more people in front and behind cameras, but I mean, they always tell me which project is more difficult, and I answer. I mean, it gets more difficult if you're making more ambitious project, but you're also gaining experience with time. So if this was a more ambitious project, I also had more experience, and so it makes it even. You know, if a smaller first feature against a bigger second feature, you know what you gain in experience, but I mean the obstacles of course are bigger, so it evens out. Regarding the space between them, it was pretty natural, organic. When I finished Workforce, I mean shooting Workforce, I was editing, but I also started thinking like what do I want to do next? What are the issues that I want to talk about? And I think like 6 months after finishing Workforce, I started writing Heroic. So I mean, it takes time, the writing, and I think, I mean, between the shooting of Workforce and Heroic, it was 3 years.
Yeah.
I think it's a healthy separation, what it takes to, you cannot, of course, I mean, some people may start thinking about next projects without even shooting what they're doing. But I like to shoot and then start thinking, and then shoot and start thinking about the next project. And yeah, I think 3 years for me, 2.5 would be.
For the screenwriting, a film like Heroic, you have to, in order to make that world believable, you have to do research. But a film like this, or this world, there's no documentation. Yeah. It's a very secretive world.
It's hermetic. Yeah, it's secretive. Yeah, hermetic is not a word in English.
So I imagine you had some kind of a source to sort of like inform.
Yeah, it's a secretive world, as you say it. It's I took the job seriously, because again, if you're talking about a secretive world, there's a responsibility with it, because there's not a lot of information, and it's a really important issue now in Mexico. So I wouldn't feel comfortable just making things up and taking.
There's no liberties.
I did research it deeply through many ways. I mean, of course, reading a lot, news and all that. But the most important thing, I mean, I went also to some of the
cadet school, military
some
school?
of the schools, But the most important thing was interviewing myself with people that had been in the army, in the military school. That was crucial. And their testimonies, I mean, I found really marvelous people, very sensitive people, willing to open up, their experience, their testimonies, and it was really shocking to hear all these stories. I mean, I learned a lot through them, not only about the military school, but about human endurance. What can be. I mean, it was. Amazing for the film, but also for me personally, I think I grew up a lot hearing all these testimonies. And then the actors in the film, most of them are ex-cadets. So I first, when I was writing, I interviewed myself with many of them, and I realized I'm not going to be able to make this film only with actors, because there's too many details and specific ways of.
There's mannerisms.
Which goes back to Workforce, I mean, I think that I'm finding that style suits me as a filmmaker, and also, I think it's important, especially when you're talking about subjects this sensitive, and it worked in Heroic, and it wouldn't be the same without this research, and without having these actors, well, non-actors, but real cadets.
They're the bullshit detector. They're telling you, hey, this scene, like this table scene is not working.
When I was planning the shoot, I was like, asking Santiago, who's the main actor in the film, and the other guys, I was like, would this happen this way or not? Even when we were rehearsing, we met in a park. We rehearsed things, and we were like. I was telling them about some scenes. They didn't know the whole story, because I didn't want to, I wanted for it to flow naturally. And I always asked them, would this happen or not? And they were, invaluable in this process. Yeah.
The layers of violence that are depicted in this film, there's a multitude of forms. There's overt samples of cruelty. There's psychological manipulation. There's humiliation. But oddly enough, I had a little meter when I was watching it. I was more shocked when the military, different factions of the military personnel were watching the snuff films, and their reaction to that, the fact that there's glee on their face and that there's almost happiness, that I thought that was the most disturbing, violent element to the film. So I was just wondering if you could tell me the importance of repeating that action where they consistently look at these snuff films, and it's like as if we were watching video clips. What was the importance of you having them repeat that motion, and also that idea that for them to be at a point where violence is so second nature and where they don't really, there's no consciousness there. Like, I just wanted to get a sense of the importance of embedding that into.
Yeah, I mean, for me, with the military being now so present, I mean, it's in Mexico, the subject is it's embedded in our lifestyle, in the civil society, military, and civil society nowadays. I don't think there has been such a relationship. It's everywhere, So what I wanted to maybe try to reflect about was the process, of course, that is, first of all, who they are, where they come from. No one asks these questions in Mexico, or at least I haven't seen them. In the media, you only see the consequences, the violence, but the violence is a consequence of something else. It's not the cause of anything, or it's not, it's. So I did want to study the causes of this violence, and starting from who these guys are, where they come from, why did they enlist in the army. I think that conversation has to happen, especially in Mexico. And then the process, of course, I mean, once they get into these schools or in the military in general, in the army, what happens, what's the psychological process they go through, and how, I mean, is this something like being thought about? Is this something that's being controlled in a way? Is someone thinking, what are these guys? These guys are going to be in charge of the security of Mexican people because they are the police. I mean, the police is losing terrain,
grip, ground,
and the military is gaining it, and so they're in charge of Mexican security in a way nowadays. But who is in charge of what they're exposed to? I mean, because. Yeah, it's I don't know. I just think, and I wanted to reflect about the humanizing process inside these schools, and what are they becoming? I mean, the people that supposedly have to take care of us. Who are? I mean, what has been their psychological process in this institution? And are we sure? I mean, that it's isn't there some loose ends that we would like to think about, like? The things they have access to, or the thing they behave inside, how they treat each other. So these things they see, I mean, there were stories, I mean, people told us like, yeah, we used to see this. And I mean, at the end, the army has this idea that, I mean, if you're in the army, you have to end up being a little bit dehumanized because you may have to kill. You have weapons, so you have to be ready to kill. How do you make a civilian
desensitizing?
I mean, if young people enter there, 18, when they go out, they have to be able to kill. So they're in the process. It goes through that process, and what they're exposed to has to make them able to kill. So it's not only that videos they might see, and they do see them, but I mean, what's in the? I mean, in Heroic, if someone sees it, most of the people of the scenes there, on the ideas, particular ideas of the humanizing, or most of them are real stories, So that's what they go through. in order to be desensitized, you know, for killing, and they are taking care of us. But I don't know. It's complex, but I wanted to
Did you
portray that.
I was just thinking of the scene where they're used as sort of like I don't want to say mop, but they're used as a carpet. Is that something that you created, or is that something?
No.
Wow.
I didn't create it. I mean, maybe I put these things together to create a story, you know, but everything has happened, you know. There has been deaths inside, there has been these kind of games, there has been that kind of abuse. I didn't make anything up, and I mean, I put it together as a writer, you know. That's my job. That's you know, the perks of the job. But yeah, everything I heard about from them. Yeah, and even some of them, when they just saw the film, it's like when I was telling them, and when we were shooting, and they were like, I was, you know, discussing the scenes, or they were like, it's even worse, you know, what you're portraying is not.
Wow, it's the PG rated version of.
It's a PG rated version. Yeah.
I thought that it was really interesting. I was thinking a lot of your antagonist in the film, especially like how you introduce him. It's almost like, I love that track. Sorry, not a tracking shot, but is it a tracking shot when you're scaling backwards?
Yeah, we go with him.
Yeah. So, but what I liked about that is when we're first introduced to that character, we don't know his DNA. It's only at the very end where we see a little glimmer of how mean he could be. And I was thinking a lot about that character, and I said, when this kid came into the cadet force, the army school, maybe 3 years ago, he might have looked like the protagonist of your film.
Yeah, they discuss it in a scene, I think. You know? I mean, I don't want to spoil anything to the viewers, but in the pool, I don't know. I mean, yeah.
It's fascinating how jarring. There's like this huge separation between them, but yet there's also this proximity. So it's like, it's easy to paint a bad guy, but I was thinking a lot about he's just another cork he's just another part of a system.
And that's the way it is. I mean, the newcomers, I mean, they call it that way. They call them potros, colts, and they, when they are in the first year, they have to obey everyone and be abused, and then they start abusing. And they also say, like, no, next year we'll take it out on the new colts. And I mean, that's the way it is. I'm not.
It gets carried over.
Yeah.
I really like how you embedded. I won't say dreams, but it's more nightmare escapes or nightmare scopes. There's a little bit of fantasy, especially like the scene between a mother and son, and like there's a discipline aspect to it. I don't want to give anything away. I just wanted to get an idea of if you could expound on the need to introduce those things. Was it to surprise the audience, or to get more into the psychological profile of a guy who doesn't really have he's mum, he can't really share the experience? Was that a way to process his psychological traits?
I mean, I think it's a personal choice. I mean, when you're working with a character and you have to portray a psychological state, there's many ways to do it. Me personally, I don't know, I always have these things for dreams. I think they have been very important in my understanding of myself. I remember when I was writing Heroic, I was in a moment, doesn't happen to me all the time, but I had a difficult time trying to, when I thought of like things that have passed, I had a hard time, and there's some moments in my life, and that was one of them, where I couldn't clearly differentiate if I had dreamt stuff or they have happened. So when I was writing this, I was in one of those moments or states. So I was like, I mean, I don't remember if some stuff happened or I dreamt it. So I'm gonna use this if it's happening to me, to the character, you know. And the reality is maybe I don't know if he knows what's going on. I mean, it's but I used what happened. I mean, as any creator, I used what happened to me or happens to me often in the reflection of his psychological state. And it was a bet. I didn't do it in workforce, but again, you're evolving as a person and as a human, and understanding yourself better. And I used it in this film.
I wanted to talk about it's a very specific backdrop. I was actually struck by the fact that that a military base could look like that. Is that something that actually exists, or is that something that you saw that and said,
Oh no, I mean, if people...
That's a military school that we see, that backdrop.
I mean, that's not a military school, but if people Google Heroic Military School in Mexico, that's the name of it, you'll see something very similar.
Okay.
You know? So I went and found a place that could depict that, I mean, the feeling of it. Yeah.
It's very interesting because it seems like a very history-rich location. And I think one of the ideas that permeates in this film is just like it's a cycle that just repeats itself. So like I was thinking like maybe there's some historical attachment to the past. And
the real deal, I mean, the real school, the real Heroic Military School in Mexico has this ancient architecture.
Oh, really? Wow.
You know, like the main building is from an Aztec god named Huitzilopochtli, and I mean it's a real face, and the dorms are like pyramids, so it has this kind of architecture. People should look for it, and it's very interesting. And I found this other place that kind of looks like it, and took some, I mean, the sculpture, and they talk about the sculpture in the film.
Yeah.
It's from an Aztec god.
Yeah.
That sculpture is not from an Aztec, but the real school has a building that's from an Aztec god. So I took those things and mixed it with the new location I found, and it kind of worked.
It's very triumph of the will a little bit, like when you think of decoupage and stuff like that.
Identity as well. It depicts, you know, the problematic of identity in Mexico. It's complex. 500 years of westernization and losing of the indigenous identity, and you know, the army is full of the people from the poorest states, which are also the indigenous portion of the country, even if they are the culture remains on them or it has disappeared, but I mean. And they come from the indigenous first inhabitants of that region, but yeah, the identity is coming and going, and at the end, I mean, they are representing a country that may not even recognize themselves as a culture, you know, in a way. So it's complex, and I wanted to also talk a little bit about that in the film through Luis, you know, his mother, how he speaks or doesn't speak the language of his ancestors, you know. And
going back to the dormitory, you choose that location. You choose to revisit that location on many occasions, and I always felt that it was not dressed differently, but that it looked differently. There was almost a gothic vibe. There was like enhanced brightness at the very onset. And you're playing with a lot of ideas in this dormitory. So I want to just get a sense of what kind of discussions you have with Carolina about the moving camera aesthetic. Like I was saying, it's not even a zigzag. It's like it's almost like Michael Snow. You know, like how the guy holds a spoon. I almost felt like the cinematography. There's one fantastic scene when the antagonist chums up and becomes a little bit friendly with the protagonist, and just the camera movement there I thought was really, really interesting. So I want to get a sense of what kind of discussions you had in portraying and getting into the fly on the wall aspect, and also the fact that it changes in appearance.
Yeah, I mean, the dorm is, I mean, for me, in the real deal, in the school, it's the most intimate part of, I mean, because there's, you know, the classes and the marching and target practice and all those activities but the dorms is where they're alone, where the power dynamics, you know, happen, because it's not gonna happen when there's other, you know, people around. It's gonna happen when they're alone with this. So for me, I mean, most of the scenes happen in the dorm, because that's where I think emotionally everything happens inside these kind of places, and the camera had to reflect that, had to be both close to the characters. I mean, there, live the experiences with them, and also be distant enough to have a bigger picture of the layout of the place. So it was just a balance, and I discussed the difficult thing with there was the lighting, because if the camera moves a lot and it's not a big space.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So but we took this many references of following people around small places and being with them, a little bit opposed to what Workforce was, when it was always distant. But here we wanted to make something different, to be closer to the action, to the main guy, and go with him through this experience in these intimate spaces. And that's how we came to this creative decision of the camera inside these places.
You almost understand the bravery that it takes for him to ask for a meeting from the higher up. Just that walking through all these tables shot, I thought was fantastic. We're gonna wrap up. I'll do a last question. So you're off to. Congratulations! You're also going to the Berlin Film Festival with the film, which is a big deal for you, because your last film you sort of did the tail end, did the fall festival season. Now you're doing this. What are your hopes with this film? Is there a dialogue that you want to have with people from your native Mexico? Is it because there's a lot of métier, there's a lot of things to discuss. Is that besides being offering a new artistic creation, is there something that you're hoping that can stir people up and get a discourse or discussion out of it?
Well, I mean, first of all, the film has had a good reception. I mean, we're in Sundance, it's going to Berlin. Probably the international reception will continue in a good way, I hope so. But the most important thing for me is the film is available in Mexico, and that all these positive first steps that it's taking reflect on a wider audience in Mexico. That's in a way, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that even if people enjoy it outside, they will not deeply get from the film, because it's made in Mexico. I thought about the Mexican audience. There's a lot of Mexican background in it, and
there's a lot more nuance for people that are from there, and they understand just the given scene. They understand the hierarchy difference,
layers,
the dynamic, power struggle.
Exactly, and the culture in general. I mean, I think it's a very Mexican film, and people there will appreciate it a lot. And I hope, I mean, my only hope is that, I mean, after all this traveling internationally, it gets to the audience in Mexico, and it creates a little bit of discussion about the subject that a film revisits. And I mean, there's not many expectations. I mean, you make films and about subjects that are important to you, then of course you wish for it to be seen and appreciated, and maybe but
everything else is extra.
It's not like I'm thinking I want to
I hear you. You're not going to change
expose them anything. It's like I mean, hopefully people will watch it. And
hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.